Stitt's very cruel, very idiotic comms person, Carly Atchison. So she, I think, writes a lot of his stuff because it all has that same kind of trolly, triggering language to it. But so he put out a video earlier this week, I think, where he signed House Bill 1775, which is the one that will ban schools from mandating gender and diversity trainings, but also has the added effect of telling teachers you can't teach divisive topics or things that upset white people, like critical race theory or I don't know, stuff that makes people think but may make people feel uncomfortable. Not allowed to teach that in schools anymore. No clue how they're going to enforce that, but whatever. So obviously this pisses a lot of people off on both sides, but, it pisses off the people who take racism seriously and think that we have structural problems in our society that we should probably at minimum talk about, but definitely do something about. So, of course, they're full on culture war with this. So this one is both, to me, like the transition between idiocy and cruel, because it's idiotic because they're just playing like word salad game, right? They stick all this stuff in the law that says, well, look, it says here you're not allowed to be racist. So now you're the real racist, even though, of course, that's not what anyone on the left is trying to do, or anyone who's trying to address systemic racism. It's all a smokescreen. But then the cruel part gets to be is where they're going to use this to punish people they don't like politically. And here's an example of them kind of doing it. I stand by what I said. If you want to be taken seriously and treated with respect, that goes both ways. Name calling, retweeting bad memes, and crying out white supremacy when the governor is Cherokee every time there's a disagreement on policy is not journalism, it's activism. So what this is in regard to was the Black Wall Street Times reached out to him to get a comment, and Sarah Gray, I guess, is doing some, press work for him to try and get stuff out. And so Carly's trying to use that as the wedge. And here's the Black Wall Street Times, where they, just won't respond. And of course, in a seemingly racist sort of way, because, Stitt's happy to go on Newsmax or Fox News or whatever and answer, whatever softball questions they have. But if the Black Wall Street Times calls and wants a response to why are you signing this racist bill, suddenly, it's a sarcastic response from his communications department because they don't want to answer tough questions and they don't want to do anything except grind the culture war axe. And this is where, again, it transitions from, I think, idiotic to cruel, because then you have the Secretary of Education, Ryan Walters, placing an op-ed in the Tulsa World saying Oklahoma House Bill 1775 says we must teach history without prejudicing the future. And it's this, like, carefully written argument about, that you can't, students may not be taught that they are oppressors because of their race and sex. It's all this like really careful stuff to like push back against, I guess critical race theory, but really against anything that makes white people feel uncomfortable, right? It's not about, I don't know. It's not about what they say it's about. It's about, maintaining white supremacy and not allowing these discussions to go on about why things are the way they are, and maybe it has something to do with systemic oppression and the systems we have set up and the games we have rigged over the course of, 200 and some years of American history, 400 years if you go back to landing on this continent. And they don't, it's the most bizarre fight. But the fact they have to pass laws saying that you can't teach certain ideas, I think, is very telling. It really, really tips you off to what they're really worried about.
Yeah, and to go a step further on the cruelty element of it. So if you cannot teach children, if we cannot have these discussions amongst ourselves, then things will never change. There are some simple facts that exist in the state. 6 out of every black men go to sleep in a cage. We incarcerate more black men than any place on the face of the earth and on the earth. in the history of the modern world. Is that simply by coincidence? Are we to believe that black men are simply more criminal? Or have we created an environment in which we put black boys on school to prison pipelines? I know I was one of those black boys, right? Um, as far as economic outcomes for all black, brown, indigenous, all of them, there are substantial disparities in economic outcomes, health outcomes. Are we to believe that that is some pathology, some deficiency of theirs? Or are we going to have a discussion about why did things exist as they do? And if we don't have those discussions, the world will continue to exist in this oppressive way, right? We will continue to lop these injustices on people, and the world will never change. That being ideal, because the individuals passing these bills, championing these bills, currently view themselves as top of the totem pole, and that is their overall goal. And so the overall goal is to stay on top and continue caging black folks and killing indigenous folks by the state and the like. And that is the cruelty. So really quickly though, he's Cherokee thing. If you read it, I cite this book often, The Condemnation of Blackness, right? You read it. And then one thing he does is define whiteness. And some of you, you probably have ancestors. If one of you have like an Italian ancestor, Irish ancestor, if I asked 130 Greek ancestor, if I asked 130 years ago, it's like, yo, you white. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, I'm Italian, right? No, I am Irish. Like there was this transition, this shift to whiteness to encompass all of these individuals as white in order to condemn black. And I say that to say Kevin Stitt moves as a white man until it benefits him, right? He doesn't get a chance. And so Irish and Italian people were not allowed to move as white, right? Until they were brought in essentially in the early part of the 20th century. Kevin Stitt gets to move as a white man. He moves as a white man, right? Until it comes time, someone says, yo, Kevin, you racist. Oh, I'm Cherokee, right? If you are so fucking Cherokee, what are your actions on McGirt? You're trying to help your wealthy. Every day he's using McGirt as a cudgel on Twitter to as against indigenous sovereignty. Are you Cherokee that day, Kevin? Yep. Right. So this notion of I'm Cherokee, no, he gets to move in and out when it's advantageous to him. And many indigenous people in this state do not have that fucking advantage. They don't get to be Cherokee today and not Cherokee tomorrow. They don't get to be Seminole today. If you don't believe me, look at the rate of police killings of indigenous people. It's higher than black people. They don't get the ain't indigenous today. Right? Many of them don't get that. If Kevin Stitt gets his way, right, and his business interests find a way to make McGirt as advantageous to them at the expense of the tribes are like, oh, well, hold on now. We ain't indigenous today. No, like they don't get that option. And again, everything with Kevin Stitt is so disingenuous, man. He's Cherokee when he doesn't want to respond to a black publication. He's not Cherokee when he's trying to fuck the tribes on McGirt. Was he Cherokee when he was trying to fuck them and he lost the court case trying to screw them on the casino agreements? How Cherokee was he that day? Yeah. Right? When he could have just raised taxes on wealthy people who were trying to find money, he was trying to squeeze the tribes out of money. Was he Cherokee that day? Tell you a funny story, man. And Walter White, if you don't know about Walter White, you should read about him. He's an incredible NAACP guy. Early part of he's like hired Thurgood Marshall. And I'm just telling the story, guys. You gotta get me off these tangents. But he was in the Arkansas Delta, and Walter White could pass as a white man. He was that light skinned. He could pass as a white man, but he identified as a black man. So he was in the Arkansas Delta, I forget which city, and somebody said, and he was doing some organizing, and somebody said they found out, and he's at the train station, and they say, yo, apparently there's an NAACP organizer down here rebel rousing. We about to go lynch him. And Walter White was like, oh yeah? And hopped on the train and went to Little Rock. He always told that story. Just I don't know. I just want to tell the story of like maneuvering in and out. Obviously, Walter White used it to further the causes of black people. One of the great civil rights leaders of his day, all time, Kevin Stitt, using I Am Cherokee to continue racist behavior. But when the rubber hits the road, and when his role as governor to fight for what the indigenous tribes of the state actually are owed, he always comes short. He ain't Cherokee that fucking day.